We have been looking forward to this day for a long time. After over 2 years of explaining the enormous potential of Zelda for Wii U, and then The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, here we are to explain why it is exactly what we wanted, why it is so different from Zelda games in the past, and how it might change gaming forever. To put it rather lightly, we believe it is a true game changer. Quite literally, Breath of the Wild is a game changer, not just for the Zelda series and other open world games, but the entire gaming industry as a whole. Future games and developers on all platforms will be learning from Breath of the Wild in the same way Breath of the Wild learned from the likes of the open world of Skyrim and past Zelda games. In any work of art, inspiration will lead to new ideas that also spark inspiration. Now then, let's not waste any more time. In Breath of the Wild, the world itself is alive, as the landscapes, buildings, and ruins are not only for decoration or serve purpose as a static background. Hyrule is filled with secrets and unlimited distractions that will extensively prolong your game time to well over 100 to 200 hours. Every wall or rooftop in this massive world can be climbed if you have enough stamina. You can use hundreds of different weapons in a way that would, in a large extent, make sense in our real life. Use an axe to cut down trees. Utilize multiple different swords, bows, shields of different races and cultures. Catch, tame, and register horses. Hunt wildlife, and then prepare meals from ingredients such as meats, fish, herbs, and numerous spices. And it is this strange feeling of realism and logic of actual physics and chemistry that makes us so attached to this interpretation of Hyrule. In this game, our lust for exploration is boundless, as there is always something new to fight, engage, mount, or discover. Every mountain needs to be climbed, every challenge conquered. What is impossible in other games is possible in Breath of the Wild, as nearly every surface is interactive. Weapons break, armor has to be upgraded, heavy hits are devastating to your health. You need to feed yourself to sustain in the dangerous environments. Falling from commanding heights results in an instant game over. Outside of the different settlements and stables, monsters, wildlife, and even some people are either out to kill you or even hunt you for dinner. It is this blend of organic and recognizable wildlife, enemies, and NPCs with a living, breathing world that might kill you in mere seconds that marks for the great appeal of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Realism is one thing, but these are mechanics, settings, and elements that we have seen in other open-world sandbox games such as Skyrim, Witcher 3, or Red Dead Redemption. What makes Zelda differ from said titles is how it seamlessly blends realism with fantasy in a way that feels both natural and logical. A good example here is the key item in the game, the Sheikah Slate. The different Sheikah runes may appear silly for some at first, but manipulating physical elements is fun, thoughtful, and most importantly, rewarding in a number of situations. Experimenting with the mechanics is key in this boundless and free open air. This particularly goes for climbing, a mechanic that changes everything, and naturally the use of the Sheikah runes, leading to multiple solutions to said puzzle or even reaching a specific shore, peak, shrine, or main quest destination. But you need to keep watch on your stamina gauge until it's been severely extended upon collecting numerous spirit orbs from the Sheikah Shrines of Trial. Naturally, the punishment if you fail to watch this key mechanic is either dropping down hundreds of feet or drowning of exhaustion. Unlike traditional RPGs with quasi-historical settings such as Skyrim, Witcher 3, or Red Dead Redemption, the setting in Breath of the Wild consists of all imaginable settings and environmental challenges found in our own world. You have grassy fields, traditional forests, rainforests, vast desert areas, tundra, snowy mountain ranges, canyons, tropical areas, seas, lakes, rivers, swamps, cliffs, etc. If that wasn't enough, most of these provinces have specific weather climate, towns, villages, people, culture, recipes, clothing, weapons, and more. And if you thought that was it, then you are wrong, as the sky is definitely not the limit in this game. Without spoiling, let us say it's this variety of gameplay styles and freedom to utilize in your exploration and experimentation that makes Breath of the Wild unique and stand out from other open-world sandboxes. Every day is different in Hyrule. For instance, you can begin your day on foot, followed by fighting enemies and riding a freaking bear or deer after hunting down and cooking up some delicious attack or stealth surging breakfast, mining some minerals, glide to locate and reach new locations or towers far in the distance, sail the sea to find some fresh dinner at a deserted tropical island, and even shield surf down a giant mountain prior to heading for a soft bed and regenerate some extra hearts for the next day. There is an uncountable amount of well thought out content through interesting and varied landscapes, places and settlements, minigames, enemies, mini-bosses, shrines and shrine quests, divine beasts, interesting NPCs leading in several cases to in-depth multi-stage side quests, a massive castle with hours worth of exploration, a story of the past and present times worth an entire quest to unlock, plus hundreds of hours of gameplay in the wilderness. Combined with a successful blend of traditional Zelda staples with futuristic technological elements, you have an adventure which stands out, feels fresh, unique, and memorable. All of this combined in a desolate, somber, and post-apocalyptic, but at the same time familiar and magical Hyrule. Even though several of the societies have not totally collapsed under this destruction, Breath of the Wild somehow conveys a more depressing post-apocalyptic setting than the likes of Fallout 4. Rather than introducing you to a kingdom in its golden age, you are slowly weaned into the memories, showcasing times of hope before things truly took a turn for the worse. And instead of being a bystander of this ongoing conflict, you are at the source. We won't go deep into any story details as to refrain from spoiling, but we mean it when we say Breath of the Wild has by far the darkest and most mature Zelda story since Majora's Mask. Not so much in tone, but in theme. Its story deals with mature themes such as loss, destruction, treason, and the dire consequences of failure, making it far from a kid's game. And though the story and intrigues are a far cry from being as complicated as something like Game of Thrones or The Witcher 3, it is still far more thought-provoking than previous entries in the Zelda franchise. Hyrule is made up of 120 dungeons known as Sheikah Shrines, and finding one of these shrines is already a challenge in itself. They are tactically placed all throughout the game's world and act as fast travel points once you activate them. The contents of these shrines vary. The first type is getting from point A to point B by going through obstacles in the form of puzzles, most of which are physics-based. More often than not, this will require you to use the runes at your disposal. Most of these shrines are not particularly difficult, but can be if you're not well equipped, in which case you'll have to leave and come back later. We've definitely had experiences with running out of arrows or torches for the flame-based puzzles. If you find yourself pulling your hair at a shrine, chances are there is something obvious that you've overlooked. We are still on our quest to complete all 120 of the shrines, and we have yet to find one that hasn't been expertly crafted. The second types of shrines are combat ones, with either minor, modest, or major tests of strength. You simply have to destroy the combat guardian in order to complete said shrine. Once you get pretty far in the game, even the major tests of strength can become easier than intended, but the most interesting shrines are the shrine quests. These quests involve completing a challenge in Hyrule rather than inside the shrine itself. They also have a great amount of variety to them, from completing a maze, navigating an area shrouded in darkness, to going on an island with all of your inventory wiped out. Shrine quests offer a greater challenge than the rest of the shrines combined, and they make exciting gameplay variety not seen in any Zelda games prior. Shrines are great, but where are the actual dungeons? Well, this time, there's only 4 in Breath of the Wild, in the form of the Divine Beasts. Each of these beasts are built up with events that allow you to temporarily demobilize them in order to embark. Some of these buildups are incredible, like Van Ruta's, while others can either be too easy or boring. As for the dungeons themselves, we kind of have a love-hate relationship with them. For one, they're almost nothing like traditional dungeons. They're small, short, and don't have a lot of enemies, and the boss battles at the end of them all bear a similar resemblance. Thankfully, the bosses themselves prove to be quite the challenge and abolish the conventions of Zelda bosses having one massive weak point you have to hit about 3 times. We also love that you're able to control these beasts to shape the interior of the dungeon and play around with the physics-based puzzles inside. Every time, you have to access 5 terminals aboard the beasts in order to activate the main terminal and successfully revive them. Repetitive? Sure. But the path to get to these terminals is different every time, and we praise director Hidemaru Fujibayashi and his team for such clever level design. We just hope in the next Zelda game 10 years from now that they decide to incorporate more traditional dungeons, specifically one for each province. On the topic of traditional dungeons, Hyrule Castle is incredible. You're able to go to it at any time in the game and witness some nostalgic music akin to Ocarina of Time. It's massive, there are plenty of secrets, and some incredibly tough enemies you can just run past. However, when we mentioned that the bosses in the dungeons all look and behave similarly, we also mean that about the final boss. We won't show him in this video, but know that we were left extremely underwhelmed after its completion. More on that later. Breath of the Wild does not control like your traditional Zelda game, not by a long shot. Gone are the times of button mapping your items you've acquired in dungeons. Gone is pressing A to roll. Now we have a jump button, and that's just the start. Every button on the Switch and Wii U is used in this game, and most of them cannot be changed, with the exception of the jump and sprint buttons, which can be reversed. In any other Zelda game, you'd be able to map the face buttons and maybe the right trigger to choose which item you'd like to use for that button. Well, that's not the case anymore. Every item and weapon, mostly weapons, you get is used with the Y button. There is also an easier way to skip between weapons, runes, and shields thanks to the D-pad. If you hold the appropriate button on the D-pad, you'll be able to easily switch items using the right analog stick. It takes a while to get used to, but it's convenient nonetheless. The inventory system is more robust in this Zelda game than any other one preceding it. Once you pause, it displays your melee weapons, bows and arrows, shields, armor, materials, food, and key items. You're able to expand these inventory slots if you visit Hestu and redeem them using Korok Seeds. Since Korok Seeds are ridiculously easy to find, this is a convenient way to ensure you have as many weapons as possible in case they break. Which they will. If you ask just about any gamer which game has the best music of all time, they will tell you The Legend of Zelda. Hopefully. However, Breath of the Wild approaches music in a drastically different way than previous entries. Rather than blaring the glorious theme of Hyrule Fields while riding your horse through the plains, you will hear some soft, ambient musical notes on a piano or flute. We were a little apprehensive when we found out about this at first, but after playing, we deemed it better that softer, impressionistic tones be at the forefront when exploring the vast kingdom of Hyrule. A loud, bombastic soundtrack like in previous games would totally break immersion otherwise. It would get in the way of the grand open-air environment. Thankfully, we still have some impressive scores that play when entering villages, dungeons, and more sinister areas like the Lost Woods. I'm sure glad we got that soundtrack CD, because Breath of the Wild is some of the best music in the series, but in a different way than you might expect. Breath of the Wild is also the first game in franchise history to feature voice acting. Granted, the traditional text boxes outnumber voice to dialogue about 5 to 1. The vocal performances are thankfully leagues ahead of Metroid Other M's, but some characters' voices shine much brighter than others. For example, Zelda's voice actor just doesn't sound fit for the role. Zelda is supposed to be late teens, but the actress is clearly older than that, and even her British accent sounds phony. However, other characters like Daruk and Urbosa have voice actors that give grade A performances that we just can't get enough of. But keep in mind that sometimes an actor's performance can only be as good as the direction they're given, so either party could be at fault here. We'd also like to point out that we have no quarrel with any of these voice actors, even if we aren't fans of their performances. Chances are, we'd be more than delighted to meet them in person. However, if the Zelda series is going to continue making a bigger push for voice acting, they're going to have to prove that they can make it better in the long run. When we saw the E3 2011 tech demo of what a potential Zelda game could look like on the Wii U, some of us, or maybe just me, were slightly disappointed to find out that Breath of the Wild would once again adopt a cel-shaded art style similar to the Wind Waker and Skyward Sword. However, Breath of the Wild style could be described as a blend of Wind Waker's cel shading and Skyward Sword's impressionistic style, and thankfully this time in HD. Matter of fact, it was better that they chose this art style to further differentiate it from the other photorealistic open-world games. And perhaps the limited power of the Wii U and the Nintendo Switch were also factors in choosing an animated design. And in the end, it paid off. Breath of the Wild looks about as gorgeous as a film by Studio Ghibli, with bright saturated colors, expressive anime faces, gorgeous lighting. Everything just pops out in this entire world of Hyrule. That's why we play the game in Pro HUD mode, to soak in all the beauty. Sometimes it doesn't look all that great though. Texture quality is muddy in certain areas, notably on wood and rocks, but the full package is more than enough to make up for those minuscule issues. Breath of the Wild is not a perfect game. In fact, frame rate has become a popular topic of discussion when referring to the game's minor issues. Even on the Switch, the game still experiences a number of frame rate hiccups that are rarely baffling, but still apparent nonetheless. This isn't because the game is utilizing all the Switch's hardware to its maximum limits, but mainly because the game was built for the Wii U first. We guarantee that if it was built from scratch on the Switch, these framerate problems would be less of, or even a non-issue altogether. Nevertheless, there's an even bigger problem at hand, and that is how the game concludes. We won't put any spoilers in this video, but we ask that you temper your expectations for the final boss and cutscenes. We all came away from the game scratching our heads in disappointment by the time the end credits rolled, but in spite of its flaws, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is still one of the most incredible games ever made, because it gets just about everything right. The number of complaints we have can literally be counted on one hand. After an incredibly long and painful wait, it is everything we asked for, though the dungeons should have been more extensive or alternatively more in numbers. We hope that gets fixed in the next Legend of Zelda game about 10 years from now. Whether you're going to be playing this game on the Switch or the Wii U, you're going to have one hell of a time with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Thank you so much for watching.